Hello, everybody. Tonight's guest is the first woman to win the Montane Spine Race outright and smash the record on it. And she has given up her time for countless interviews so far about it, which have been inspiring to so many people. So tonight I am thrilled to announce to you Jasmin Paris. Hello, Jasmin.
Hi.
So first of all, we've got tons of people watching live. That's absolutely fantastic to see you all there. I'm going to have to rattle through these questions because we've got bath time waiting for Rowan. But first of all, Jasmin, could you explain what the spine race is for newcomers, like terrain, navigation, that kind of thing?
Yeah, so it's a 268-mile long race along the Pennine Way, running from Edale in the south to Kirkyetholme in the north. It's a non-stop race, which means that sleep is really quite a big component, the decision of how much to sleep. You have to navigate, you have to carry all your own kit, including food, sleeping bag and so on if you had to sleep out, and obviously lots of clothes. And critically, it's running midwinter in mid-January, so you might be faced with snow, wind, bad weather conditions, but especially you'll have a lot of darkness. Two-thirds of it's in the dark.
It sounds wonderful. And interestingly, you'd actually seen competitors on the spine race whilst doing the Trigger Fell race in the past. And I've read in other interviews you said you thought they must be mad. So what made you descend into this madness and sign up for yourself?
Yes, I think probably a couple of things. Firstly, I guess it's true, I did think they were crazy, but maybe a little bit of me was sort of tempted by the idea of the challenge of it, and the idea of something where you're not really sure whether you can complete it, whether you can finish it, at least in a racing capacity. And it was sort of like a red rag to a bull a little bit. So there's that sort of part of it. And also when I signed up, which was in sort of September, October 2018. I'd sort of raced my first season after having Rowan, and I was running reasonably well again, but I didn't feel I was quite back at the form I had been previously. And I wanted to get back there, but I was really struggling to train. I was struggling to motivate myself to train in the winter months. It was sort of getting to those long nights and dark mornings, and I was having to get up at 5 to train before work, having had not very much sleep at night. So I sort of needed something to motivate me and to really inspire me. So I signed up for the spine because it was like a challenge unlike anything I'd done before, and I knew that if I didn't train, then it would be awful. So that's why I did it.
Fantastic. That's really great motivation. And interestingly, for somebody who has won countless fell races and multi-dayers like the Dragon's Back race, this is the first race that you specifically trained for with the help of a coach, Damien Hall. So how did the spine race preparation differ from your usual training or not training?
So I guess I guess one thing I should point out is that I think before you have a child, you have a lot more time to run. And after I had Rowan, once I'd gone back to work after maternity leave, the sort of time I have to train is much less than it used to be. So I'm sort of aware that now it has to be better quality maybe and less quantity. So whereas maybe before I could get away with doing stuff that didn't really matter what I did because I did quite a lot of it, I can't really get away with that anymore. So that's the first thing to say. But basically before, I guess I used to just go out running and have fun, which I still do. But I never, looking back, probably most of my runs were really what I would now call an easy recovery run. So I could still chat to people and just jog along. I don't think there's anything wrong with doing that. But I do think that if you train and put some intensity into some workouts, then you do get better. So basically when Damien was coaching me, we probably every other day was a harder session. So that might be either a speed session or maybe something just fartlek or a progression run, or some hill reps, something like that. And then at weekends that we do longer runs, usually back to back and carrying a pack because I had to get used to a pack. So that's kind of a brief summary.
Yeah, and I sort of tried to work it out because you were doing 1.5 hours during the week and then kind of 10 hours over the weekend. So like about 7.5 hours a week, which is a lot to fit. Sorry, not 7.5, 17.5 hours sleep. Bit of number dyslexia there. Does that sound about right? 17.5?
Yeah, probably like the workouts during the week were maximum 1.5 hours. I would say they weren't all that. So somewhere, because if you were just doing maybe even just a 6 mile recovery run, that would probably take me less than an hour.
Oh yeah.
So somewhere between an hour and a half. But yeah, you're right. So probably maybe 15 to 17 hours a week. Yeah.
Wow, that's so impressive with a young child. I've got a couple of questions from patrons about how you fitted it all in, especially you said over New Year you did 3 back-to-back 5 to 6 hour days, which is amazing. So Gordon Parton says, how does Jasmin fit in training with family life and little ones? I always struggle to find the time.
Yeah, so firstly, I would say I'm very fortunate to have a very supportive family. Both my parents and also Conrad's parents, really, they're wonderful, very supportive. And also my husband, Conrad, because he's a runner as well. So we do have to kind of balance that and both get out to train. So that helps. Over New Year, basically, we were on holiday in Germany with Conrad's parents. So they were doing a lot of looking after and they were enjoying that. So that's how I got away. But basically, all of my running took place at 5 a.m. So even at weekends, I was back by 10 or 11. And if Rowan was asleep till 8 a.m., then that was already quite a big chunk of that while she was asleep. So basically, I fitted it in by doing quite a lot of it in the early morning while the rest of my family was still in bed. And I think if you really want to do something, you do get more efficient about fitting in everything else around it, and also I always find that if you get up early in the morning and run, then it's got more chance of happening that way. If I leave it till later in the day, and it won't happen. So because other things take over, work and family life and everything else. But in the morning, when everybody's still asleep, then you're going to get out the door and do it. So that's the time to go.
Yeah, that's really good advice. Really, really good if you can get out of bed, which I really find difficult. So that sort of answers the next question from patrons, which I have, which is from Anna Rugg, who she's currently training for a 145-mile race, the Grand Union Canal race in May. And she wants to know if you ever had like any element of guilt when you went out training for hours and days, and like how do you balance that in your head? But it sounds like the early mornings is the answer to that.
Yeah, absolutely. So that was a big reason why, obviously during the week I had to get up early in the morning to train because of work, but at weekends it was really just because I still wanted to have a weekend with my family. I didn't want to spend my weekends just be running. So in the majority of cases I was back, as I say, in time to just have a normal day. We did do other things. For example, sometimes I would do a long run that ended at the park run, our local park run. Yeah. I would meet my family there, and then I would run the 5K pushing the buggy while Conrad raced, for example, and then we would all go home together. We also did quite a lot of sort of hiking as a family together in the hills, and I find that hiking is very good training for long distance races, because you actually spend in the hills, in long distance hill races, you spend a reasonable amount of time walking because you don't run up all the hills. So I think hiking's a good training, especially if you're carrying a baby that already weighs sort of 12 kilos or whatever she weighs. So so that was that's kind of how I fitted it in. But I really tried to make sure that my family didn't, also because I wanted to spend the time with them, but I didn't want them to kind of suffer for the fact that I was training.
Yeah, it does sound like a really good team effort, and I really like that. Like everyone gets involved, and when Rowan grows up, she'll probably be a big part of it too, and following you on her bike and all that kind of thing. It sounds really awesome. And I noticed from your blog as well, you've written a really amazing, really detailed blog about this, where if people want to have a look, it's if you just Google Jasmin Paris blog, it's the latest post on there about the spine race last year. And I was really interested to see that you looked at the pacing strategies of previous winners, and you noticed that they set off faster and then started to fade towards the end, and so you decided to try a more even pace throughout, which obviously worked. Was that what made you decide to have a crack at the record? Did you decide then, or was that kind of decision made during the race?
No, like really when it comes to the record on the spine race, I can't state this strongly enough. It's so dependent on the conditions. I mean, if we'd had deep snow, there's no way I would have broken the record. So I'm really proud of the run I had at the Spine, because I know I gave it everything. And the record was kind of almost incidental in that. Because if it had been another year, then it wouldn't have been possible. Basically, yeah, you're right that beforehand I worked out the pacing strategy, and I worked out that if you ran at 4 miles an hour, you could still have reasonable sleeps and easily break the record. But I wasn't trying to break the record. It was just that's what we worked out as the time that you would finish if you ran at that pace. As it turned out, it was impossible to run at that pace in the later stages anyway. So, and if it hadn't been that we were having such a close race with the Eugenie, I would have probably slept more and I would have finished later. It wasn't as if I was desperate to finish that evening. Although it was very nice. It was very nice to only be away from Rowan for 3 nights. So it was a real bonus.
Yeah, that is a real bonus, and you had that extra motivation to get to the finish as well. And so, just going to the race itself, how did you feel on the start line? Were you excited? What was going through your head?
Yeah, I was really excited because I really sort of, running wise, I felt that I'd done everything I could training wise. Like with having a family and working full time and then having a small child and everything, I felt that was the maximum sacrifice I could have made was the amount of training that I did, and I knew I'd put my heart into it, and so I didn't have any regrets in terms of that. I was just kind of excited about what was going to happen, and I was really looking forward to it. I guess my only sort of concerns really on the start line were this sort of anxiety about leaving my family, especially Rowan, and how they would cope, but as it turned out, they were totally fine without me. I think.
Oh no!
Rowan learned to sleep through the night while I was away. So it was good. Like, I think that sometimes, sometimes it works out like that. If you just step away from it, then you find that things are actually totally fine without you. But so that was kind of my main anxiety beforehand, and the fact that I was still breastfeeding Rowan, so I obviously had this challenge of needing to express milk at the checkpoints so that I didn't sort of develop mastitis along the route. That was a little extra anxiety, but that worked out fine as well. So it really wasn't a big issue.
Yeah, that is incredible. Like, I just big up to you for doing that, because we've seen a lot of ladies doing that. Like at the UTMB, Sophie Power was doing that, and it's just amazing what you can do. And you said on your blog, expressing the milk only slowed you down a couple of times in terms of practicalities. But I'm just wondering as well, from friends that I know who have been breastfeeding, your body does have to work a lot harder to produce the milk, and it takes a lot of energy from the body. So did you feel the effects in that way as well, not just the actual practicalities of expressing?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, because a lot of people have said to me that while they were breastfeeding, they felt really tired, and they never really never really able to run at sort of full form. I honestly can't say that I really noticed that as a big thing. Mm-hmm. I did notice that I was sort of probably a little bit hungrier all the time, and whereas I used to train, sometimes I used to just get up and go running without really eating anything. I'm not sure if that's a good thing really, but that's what I just kind of did, because that's what I did. But when I was breastfeeding, I really noticed that I needed to eat something before I went out, so I always did. So I just kind of listened to my body, I guess, and ate more when I needed it more, but it was fine. So as I say, it really wasn't actually a big deal. I didn't notice that I was particularly more fatigued from breastfeeding. By the time I was running the Spine as well, she wasn't breastfeeding that much, so I wasn't producing quite as much milk as I maybe had been before.
Yeah, she was 14 months by then. It's still still really impressive. It's absolutely brilliant. And just coming on to food, actually, you mentioned with great reverence actually the hot food on the Spine race. That it was a highlight, especially lasagna. Was it at Alston? But a non-stop multi-day race is it's not the time when you want to exist purely on energy gels. So what did you take on the move with you in between those checkpoints?
Yeah, so I'm a really big believer in real food when you're running long races. I would only ever really use a gel for like a sort of an emergency situation. So if you sort of get behind and have a real sort of slump, a gel can be useful to kind of bringing you back, I think, from that, but only to the point, only just to sort of get you eating again. That would be the only time I'd really use a gel. So I used essentially real food. I actually ate quite a lot of chocolate bars. Because chocolate bars in the cold are kind of nice somehow. I ate like nuts. I ate I'd made some trail mix. I made a real mixture of savoury and sweet, because you sort of go off all sweet stuff. So I had bagels made up with cheese. I had some sort of mini cheeses, I had Scotch eggs, I think, at the start. I had frozen pizza. Jim, that was a tip from Jim Mann. So slices of frozen pizza in my drop bag, so that by the time I got, later on in the race, they defrosted, and I just picked up some pizza. That was good. Cake, lots of sweets. But really, what I would say is it gets harder and harder to eat as you go along, regardless of what you do. And just sort of in ultra stuff I've done before, I noticed that towards the later stages, things that are easier to get down, things like rice pudding and custard and baked beans, I didn't have the luxury of carrying those when I was on the spine, because they were too heavy. So you tried to carry stuff that was light for the calories. You had to have 3,000 calories with you when you left a checkpoint. So yeah, generally I was trying to carry stuff that was energy dense, but that I would still be able to eat. That's why the chocolate kind of worked reasonably well. But that's why the food was so good at the checkpoints, because like eating a real meal after just sort of stuffing yourself with junk all day, or what felt like junk at that point. So that was a real sort of pleasure.
Yeah, luxury. Hey, luxury. and I can see from the types of things you were eating, like cheeses and Scotch eggs and things like that, that you aren't following a particular diet as a way to enhance performance. So I'm just thinking, what are your thoughts on the increasing numbers of athletes who are turning to a plant-based diet? Like, are you tempted to look into that side of things, or would you ever be tempted to give that kind of thing a try?
Yeah, I guess what I would say is that at home we actually eat mainly vegetarian, and I guess that's just because we feel ethically that it's better to probably reduce the amount of meat we eat. We're not vegetarian, but we just generally eat more veggie food. We'll cook all our food fresh, I love big salads and fruit, and so having described my race food, it is quite different when we eat at home. But in general, I would say I wouldn't turn to a plant-based diet as a way of kind of enhancing my performance. It's more likely I would do that if I felt it for kind of ethical reasons in terms of global warming and that sort of thing. But overall, I feel like a little bit of things like cake and ice cream is okay in moderation, and the same applies to kind of meat and whatever. I think it's all kind of balance is good.
Yeah, and in a race situation, you don't want to be being that really picky one, like, oh, have you got anything vegan, or like, it's harder, isn't it? You've just got to get anything in you and just go for it.
Yeah, exactly. So and in a race situation, I think for ultra racing, it's whatever you can get down that stays down and that you feel happy eating. You just need to eat. That's the main thing. Yeah,
good advice there. And lots of people on the live chat are saying what a legend you are. We've got John Gardner here saying Jasmin is so strong. She's the only ultra runner leaving calories at aid stations. So that's the breastfeeding side of things there. Everybody is loving the broadcast. They can't wait for it. And then Kurt Steege says, so if I have pizza, cake and chocolate today, I can claim to be training for the spine race.
Yeah.
And so let's just move on now to the topic of sleep, because I had a couple of questions from patrons about sleep, such as Guy Greatrex, which he was like, where do you sleep? But I'm quite interested because you only slept for about just 3 hours in 3 days, it says on your blog, and you said you inadvertently trained for a lack of sleep, with Rowan waking up every 2 to 3 hours. So were you surprised by the lack of sleep that you had on the spine, and how did that take its toll?
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting in that I found I'd always planned that we would probably run through the first night without sleeping. I think all the leaders have done that in the past, and it's difficult to sleep on the first checkpoint because there's too many people coming in and disturbing you and so on. But I actually found that first night quite hard in terms of missing my bed, I guess, probably because of sort of a chronic sleep deprivation, and my body was just like, come on, it's your chance, quick, go to sleep. But then once I told it that it had to get on with it and stop stopped being wimpish, I guess, then it got easier. And after that first night in a way, it got easier to stay awake. Obviously, during the very later stages, I was kind of falling asleep on my feet, but it was a little bit different. Yeah, so I hadn't really planned to sleep. I'd planned to sleep more. And I still feel that, there's an argument. Maybe if I'd slept more, then I would have run faster at the end. I don't know. I guess I'd have to do it again, and you probably wouldn't be able to control all the other circumstances to know. But I had planned to sleep more. It was really a coincidence. It was the fact that Eugenie was with me, and that I was trying to get away from him, and that final checkpoint, I knew that if I slept there, then he would catch me, and I really felt that he would keep going with me. So I didn't really have a choice. So that's why I slept so little.
It's amazing that you could do that. It's just like you had to, so you just did it. It's quite amazing what the human body can achieve.
Yeah, I think apart from Rowan obviously training me, I'm also a vet. So I obviously am used to doing on-calls. I'm a specialist vet, so I did like a residency training and an internship which involved a lot of night shifts. So I'm kind of used to working long weekends and lots of overnight shifts, and that helped, I think, as well.
Yeah, there's been this sort of you see it on the spine race. The people who do really well are often people who they work in the medical profession and they're working all hours and things like that. So yeah, it is really interesting that you can, in a way, train for coping with a lack of sleep.
Yeah, probably.
And you saw some crazy things on the trail as well. Do you want to just tell us a couple of the crazy things that you saw because of lack of sleep?
Yeah, so I think really it was mainly on the last day. I saw people might have heard this before. I saw a tree doing yoga. It sort of then changed into a deer kind of rubbing its antlers to kind of get rid of its antlers. I saw a pig running through the heather. I saw everything that I looked at kind of merged into the shape mainly of an animal. So the paving stones on the Pennine Way were like kind of horses' heads or nuns with veils, or kind of like statues, like lots of kind of those sorts of forms. The trees towards the end of the race beside the road all looked like humans sort of waving their arms. Yeah, it was quite bizarre.
Was it scary? Because I could imagine if you'd watched a few scary movies the week before, they might manifest into something a bit more sinister.
I don't have time to watch TV anymore. No, it wasn't particularly scary. I think I kind of knew that I knew really that it was not real. In a way, it was kind of diverting. It sort of took my mind off. It was more like, oh, that's interesting. Look, what that tree's doing. But yeah. It wasn't particularly scary. At the end, it was a little bit frustrating because I did actually mistake some of the trees for people. And then it was kind of always a bit of a letdown when it wasn't really. I think you start seeing things that you want to see. You want to see people kind of cheering you on because you're feeling pretty lonely and it's a lot, and you're feeling pretty tired. So that was a little bit of a disappointment sometimes when that happened. But most of the time, it was just diverting, interesting.
Yeah, and I found it amazing that despite seeing all those hallucinations and even falling asleep on the trail a few times and waking up in a panic that you'd gone off route, I thought it was amazing that you did obviously maintain the presence of mind to navigate accurately, and also to notice that you were getting bitterly cold just before the end. So can you tell us how you maintained the presence of mind to do that?
Yeah, I guess that was kind of really lucky. I guess it showed that I did still have enough energy and presence of mind to do that. Because I do think you're running you're walking quite a fine line at that point when you push yourself to that extent. Probably see that because Eugenie behind me did actually get hypothermia. So I'm not quite sure. I guess years of hill experience warned me at the point when I was starting to get cold that I needed to put clothes on, because you really need to put clothes on before you get a cold when you're in the hills. So I have had lots of experience, and maybe that helped. But you're right, it's lucky that it happened that way.
Yeah, it is. It's good that you managed to get in that ditch high up on the exposed cheviers in the freezing cold and put every single item of your kit on. And I just wondered, I know you put all your kit on there, but is there one bit of kit that you loved most of all?
Probably, it probably has to be the shoes, really, because so I ran in Rocklite, the new graphene enhanced Rocklite 275s. And no, they were just really good in the sense that I actually only got one blister on each foot, and that was kind of around the big toe where some grit had got in and was kind of rubbing between my two toes. But the rest of my feet were totally fine. And I think that compared with other people, my feet were really good. So they were comfortable, they were warm, even when they were wet. So, and they just kind of gripped despite the fact that we were running on like a mixture of mud and wet rock and all sorts of stuff. So that was probably, yeah, shoes are pretty important in this sort of thing. So,
yeah.
So,
it's amazing that you got away with 268 miles with only one blister. That's absolutely incredible. Got a question here from Guy Greater X, one of my patrons. He wants to know, now that we've talked about the whole course, is there a hardest section? Was there a place where you thought that was really hard?
Well, as I kind of mentioned that I found the first night quite hard, but definitely don't think that's the kind of hardest section of the spine. I guess maybe the hardest bit for me, actually, when I think about it really carefully, was when we were sort of on that night when I was racing to get away from Eugenie, once the kind of adrenaline rush had gone and it was getting towards the early hours. When I left Hadrian's Wall, there's a section that's kind of pretty, it's just like, and it's quite boggy, and then there's these forests and then some more moors, and it seems to go on for quite a long time. That section sort of between Hadrian's Wall and Bellingham I found quite hard, and that was probably a combination of the terrain, but also the fact that I was doing it when I was very tired and it was dark. So yeah. I mean, I guess you could argue that the real hardest bits are sort of the bits that are exposed on the tops, which would be things like, over Cross Fell and over the Cheviots at the end. But I really love being in the hills, and those bits I actually didn't for the majority in the light, so they weren't that difficult for me at the time.
It like, you're bound to have some highs and lows in such a long race like that, and you definitely managed to pull yourself through them. I'm just after a little bit of advice from you, from Arlene Matelock, who says, she's one of my patrons, and she says, when it's cold and wet and dark and you are presumably miserable, what do you say to yourself to keep going?
Well, it's sort of a mixture of things. I think one thing is that if you run a lot of ultra races, you get better at being able to. In an ultra race, you tend to have a bad patch, almost always, and you might have multiple, and you just get better at knowing that it's going to pass as long as you just keep putting one foot in front of another and eating. Then it does get easier again, and I think the knowledge that that's going to happen. It helps in itself. So, and that will come with experience from doing more ultra races. But sort of tips from the spine is that when I was finding it really tough, I kind of tried to think about things that were nice. So for me, that was getting back to Rowan and what we would do on the first day I got back. Sometimes I distracted myself by thinking about the funny things that she does that make me laugh. The way she picks up a little stone or examines a flower, and that kind of sort of amazement at the world that she was showing at the age of 14 months. So that was kind of what I did to kind of distract myself. Sometimes you just almost switch off. I think long distance running can be quite meditative in some ways. So sometimes when it was like bad, really sort of bad conditions, you just hunkered down and almost switched off. So you need to be able to be with it enough to navigate. But that was it, and you kind of closed down into yourself and adopted that kind of semi-meditative state. So that kind of combination of things.
That's really good advice. Thank you for that. And so it all sounds like very difficult from what I've read about it, but there must have been some amazing parts as well. Do you have like a favourite moment or a favourite memory about the spine race?
Yeah, I mean, I really should say that people talk a lot about the kind of suffering of this race and everything, but ultimately I run in the hills because I love doing it, and I did this race and for the most part I really enjoyed myself, so I love being in the outdoors, I love being on the hills, I kind of love being in mud and rain and wind as well, I quite like that. So so overall I enjoyed myself. The kind of real highlights were despite being so tired kind of on the last day on the Cheviots, that was a really, really stunning day despite being so cold. It was very kind of lonely but wild, which I love. and there was this beautiful sunset, and then the stars came out, and it was like the whole sky was full of stars. So it was very memorable that last day. So it was probably that day that was kind of the real highlight of the race.
Yeah, it sounded really beautiful, and despite the lack of sleep, you still had time to take it all in, which is it's like the reason that we do all these races. You don't want to do it because you're just going to be in pain and miserable the whole time, do you? You want to do it and really enjoy it. So with that said, would you do the spine race again, or a similar type of race, do you think?
I for sure would do a similar type of race. I really enjoyed the spine race. I really liked the volunteers. It's a fantastic atmosphere, and I get it. I get the reason that Eugenie and Ian and Pavel keep going back. Like I can understand that, and I wouldn't rule out that I might not go back at some point. But I guess what I would say is that for me, last year at the Spine, it was almost the perfect race. You know, like I gave it everything, and it all worked out for me. And I can't help but feel that if I go back, I probably will struggle to have the same amazing experience that I had the first time. And I do feel that sometimes if you have an experience like that, then in some ways it's better to be very happy and move on and do something else, you know, rather than kind of spoil it by going back and sort of being less happy with it. Yeah, so I'm not sure. I wouldn't know, but I certainly would like to do more kind of really long ultra multi-day stuff, or non-stop kind of 200-300 mile stuff, because it was a real challenge that I enjoyed it. So I'd like to try more.
Amazing. Well, that's really good to know, because it'll be amazing to see you doing more. And just looking forward to this week's spine race. It starts on Sunday early in the morning. Do you think your record might be broken, or do you think it's going to stand for years to come? Eugenie's racing. We've got John Kelly, who's completed the Berkeley Marathons as well. He's having a go. Will you be watching the race and checking to see if your record's going to go?
I mean, I'll definitely be watching the race. I'm really looking forward to not watching it, and to being able to go to bed in the evening, actually, after checking the dots. But yeah, in terms of the record, I guess there doesn't look like there's going to be a lot of snow at the moment, so that probably will help. It's relatively wet. I can't remember if it was wetter than this last year or the same. So I don't know, maybe the record will go. It's not like I'm worried about that. Records are there to be broken. So if it does go, I'll be delighted for whoever breaks it. So we'll see.
Fantastic. And I've just got, I think I'm going to do some quick questions so that I can cut a little film to send out to everyone who's going to be on that start line on Sunday. So just these four little quick questions. What was your biggest learning about yourself from the spine race?
That's quite a hard one. I guess. Well, I mean, I guess my sort of mantra from the spine race would be just believe in yourself, and you'll be surprised. If just keep going, and you'll be surprised at how far you can actually go. And in my case, how far you can go without sleeping. So.
That's fantastic. And if you could give one piece of advice, only one thing, to somebody standing on that start line on Sunday, what would it be?
I would say enjoy it. Like, I really enjoy it. If you're having fun, you always run better anyway, and it's going to make the whole thing a real adventure that you will remember forever. So try and enjoy it.
Brilliant. And what's your best piece of advice for people when the going gets tough?
I would say remember that it's going to pass. Just keep eating, and make sure that you're warm enough, so it's never a waste of time to stop and put clothes on. It's never a waste of time to eat. So eat, stay warm, and keep moving if you're out on the trail, and it will get better again. These things always pass and improve again.
Fantastic. And what's your message to anyone standing on that start line next week?
Yeah, I guess my message would be good luck, go out and have an amazing time, and I can't wait to follow your dots.
Amazing, thank you so much. And just one final question for you, Jasmin. Thank you so much for sharing all your amazing advice and experience tonight. But one final question. I just wondered if you've got any bucket list races, there's Cape Bath Ultra, are you interested in the Berkeley Marathons? Like, what excites you for the future?
Yeah, there's loads of races actually. So I'd like to run the Tour de Géant, which I think would be like a really fun kind of non-stop multi-day race. So that's kind of exciting. I actually probably want to have another crack at some point at the UTMB and race it properly with some training. Probably the Ultra Tour of Monte Rosa as well. And maybe Hard Rock at some point if I get an entry. Maybe Cape Wrath Ultra, Barclays maybe. I don't know. We'll see about. But basically, everywhere I look, I see a race that I think, that looks incredible. I'd like to do more sky running again as well. So I really enjoy technical racing. So there's loads of things.
Yeah, it's a great way to see the world and to have an adventure, isn't it? That was just we're going to all really enjoy following your progress over those races, and just wishing you the best of luck. So sorry about the intermittent broadcasting, but thank you so much, Jasmin. We really appreciate your time, and it's just really brilliant of you to share so much of your extraordinary experience on the spine race and all your advice too. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. You're welcome, yeah. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And goodbye to everybody watching the live broadcast.
Bye.